He sat in his car on Valentine's Day, engine off, suit pressed, a bag resting on the passenger seat with a gift inside that she would never unwrap. The parking garage was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that forces a man to sit with the one thing he has been running from. And right there, in that stillness, with his phone dark and her voice still echoing in his head from a call that lasted less than 4 minutes, he understood something he had been refusing to accept for a very long time. She was gone. Not gone as in she stepped away. Not gone as in she needed space. Gone as in she had left months ago and simply never told him. He had been loving a ghost, holding on to a version of her that no longer existed, showing up every single day for a woman who had already made her decision long before he ever booked that reservation. With himself the morning after, standing with himself the morning after, standing in front of the bathroom mirror with swollen eyes and a jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He told himself he would bury it, move on, heal quietly. Let time do what everyone says time does. But time didn't heal it. Time just gave it room to grow. It showed up when he was driving and a song came on that she used to hum from the passenger seat. It showed up at 2 a.m. when his body still rolled over to reach for someone who wasn't there. It showed up in grocery stores when he caught himself reaching for her favorite coffee creamer before pulling his hand back like he had touched something hot. So he stopped pretending. The silence was eating him from the inside. Silence was eating him from the inside out. And if he held it in any longer, he was afraid of what would be left of him when it finally broke through. This is his story. Not a love story. Not really. It is the story of a man who poured 3 years of devotion into one night that never happened. A man who spent weeks hunting down a first edition copy of her favorite book, who handwrote a 4-page letter he never got to read aloud, who booked a private rooftop dinner at a restaurant she had mentioned once in a passing conversation. She probably forgot 5 minutes later. He remembered. He always remembered. That was his gift and, as it turned out, his curse. Because while he was memorizing every detail of her, she was quietly erasing every trace of him from her future. He didn't see it coming. Or maybe he did and chose not to look. Maybe the signs were there all along, hiding in plain sight behind shorter text messages, canceled plans, and the slow, painful disappearance of a question she used to ask every single day. "How was your day?" She stopped asking. And he stopped noticing that she stopped, because noticing would have meant accepting, and accepting would have meant losing her, and losing her was the one thing he had convinced himself would never happen. But it did. On February 14th, at 5 o'clock, in a 4-minute phone call that took 3 years apart at the seams, and now he has no choice but to tell you how it all began. To understand what happened in that parking garage on Valentine's Day, you have to go back 3 years. You have to go back to a Tuesday afternoon in September, inside a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso, where a man who had stopped believing in coincidences met a woman who made him reconsider. He wasn't supposed to be there. His usual spot, a quieter cafe 2 blocks east, had closed early for renovations. So he wandered into this one, laptop under his arm, no expectations, no agenda. He ordered a black coffee, sat near the window, and opened his screen to finish a project he'd been putting off for days. That was the plan. Work, focus, leave. But then she walked in. Leah. She didn't walk in the way people walk into coffee shops. She entered like she was already late for something but had decided not to care. And hair pulled back loosely. A tote bag slung over one shoulder stuffed with books and what looked like a folded newspaper, and a pair of sunglasses pushed up on her head that she never once put over her eyes. She ordered something complicated, something with oat milk and a word he had never heard before, and while she waited, she turned around and caught him staring. He looked away immediately. She didn't. She smiled. Not a flirtatious smile, not a smile that was trying to be anything. just a smile that said, "I caught you, and I'm not mad about it." He felt his neck get warm. He looked back at his screen and pretended to type something meaningful. She got her drink, walked past his table, and then, without any warning or invitation, sat down across from him. "You look like you're pretending to work," she said. He blinked. "I am working." "No, you're not. You've been staring at the same paragraph for 3 minutes. I watched you." He laughed before he could stop himself. And something in that laugh, something that had been locked behind months of routine and emotional autopilot, cracked open just enough to let her in. They talked for 2 hours that afternoon. Not surface-level small talk. Not the polite, forgettable exchanges that strangers trade over coffee and never think about again. They talked about real things. She told him she was halfway through a graduate program she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. He told her about the promotion he had turned down because it would have meant moving to a city that made him feel hollow. She told him her father had passed away the year before and that she still called his voicemail sometimes just to hear his voice. He didn't say he was sorry. He said, "I understand that more than you know." And he meant it. By the time the cafe started dimming its lights and stacking chairs, neither of them had noticed the hours pass. He walked her to her car. She scribbled her number on the back of a receipt she pulled from her tote bag and handed it to him with the same smile she'd given him earlier, only this time it carried something heavier, something that sat between a question and a dare. He called her the next morning. She picked up on the first ring. That was the beginning. Within 3 months, she had a drawer at his apartment. Within 6, she had a key. Within a year, their lives had become so interwoven that it was impossible to tell where his ended and hers began. Her books filled his shelves. Her shampoo sat next to his in the shower. Her voice was the first thing he heard most mornings and the last thing that carried him to sleep most nights. He built his days around her without even realizing he was doing it. Monday nights became their dinner nights. Saturday mornings became their walk through the park mornings. Sundays were for doing nothing together, and doing nothing with her felt more fulfilling than anything he had ever done alone. He loved her in a way that was quiet and consuming all at once. He didn't love her loudly. He didn't post about her or make grand public declarations. He loved her in the details. He loved her in the way he memorized how she took her tea when she was stressed versus when she was relaxed. 2 sugars when the world was heavy, none when she felt light. He loved her in the way he noticed she always tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was nervous, and the way her voice dropped half a register when she was about to say something vulnerable. He studied her like a language he never wanted to stop learning, and for a long time, she let him. She let him believe he was fluent. If you are still watching this video and find this video entertaining and valuable, please comment any word below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. We post videos every day, and your support helps us continue to create good content. Share these stories with loved ones and friends. Let's continue. What he didn't notice, or maybe what he chose not to notice, was the slow, almost invisible shift that started somewhere around the 2nd year. It didn't arrive with a fight. It didn't come announced. It crept in like a draft under a door, so faint you only feel it when you stop moving long enough to pay attention. And he never stopped moving. He was always planning. Always thinking 3 steps ahead, always trying to build something bigger, something better, something worthy of the woman he believed deserved more than he could give. But while he was busy building, she was quietly stepping back. It started small. She began replying to his texts a little later, not hours later, and just long enough to notice if you were paying attention. He wasn't. She started canceling their Monday night dinners, not every week, just once a month, then twice. Then it became easier to cancel than to show up, and he filled the silence with excuses he made on her behalf. She's tired. She's overwhelmed with school. She needs space. Everyone needs space sometimes. He told himself these things with such conviction that he almost believed them. Almost. Then came the questions she stopped asking. She used to ask about his day every evening without fail. It was their ritual. No matter how long or draining her own day had been, she would call him or text him and say, "Tell me something good about today." And he would. Sometimes it was something small, like a stranger holding a door open or a dog he saw on his lunch break. Sometimes it was bigger, but she always asked, until she didn't. And the silence where that question used to be grew louder with every passing week, but he trained himself not to hear it. He filled her absence with his own presence. He showed up harder, planned more, loved louder. He thought if he just gave enough, she would come back to wherever she had drifted. He thought love was a current, and that if he kept swimming toward her, eventually she would stop floating away. But that is not how it works. And deep down, in a place he refused to visit, he already knew that. So when Valentine's Day came around, he didn't see it as just another date on the calendar. He saw it as a chance to remind her, a chance to pull her back, a chance to prove that what they had was still worth holding on to. But he had no idea he was already holding on alone. He started planning Valentine's Day 6 weeks in advance, not because he was the type to obsess over holidays, but because this one felt different. There was a weight pressing on his chest he couldn't name, a quiet urgency humming beneath everything he did. And though he never would have admitted it out loud, some part of him knew this night needed to be more than just a nice dinner. It needed to be a rescue mission. He just didn't have the language for that yet. It began with the restaurant. Leah had mentioned it once back in October while they were walking through the city on a Saturday afternoon. They had passed a tall building with a rooftop patio wrapped in string lights, and she had stopped for a moment, looked up and said, "I read that there's a restaurant up there. Private tables. You can see the whole skyline." She said it the way people say things they don't expect anyone to remember, casually, almost to herself. Then she kept walking, but he didn't let it go. He never let anything go when it came to her. That night, he looked it up, found the name, read the reviews, checked the reservation policy. And 6 weeks before Valentine's Day, he called and booked a private table for 2 on the rooftop for the evening of February 14th. Window view, skyline facing east, candles included. Then came the book. Leah had a novel she'd carried with her since college, a worn, dog-eared paperback she had read so many times the spine had started to separate. She kept it on her nightstand like other people keep photographs. He had asked her about it once, early in their relationship. And she told him her father had given it to her the summer before he got sick. She said it was the last gift he ever gave her while he was still himself, before the illness slowly took him somewhere she couldn't follow. She never read another copy. Only that one. Only his. So he decided to find her a first edition. It took him 3 weeks. He searched online bookstores, rare collections, auction listings, private sellers. He sent emails to dealers in cities he had never been to, asking if they had a copy, explaining what it meant without saying too much. Most of them said no. A few never replied, but eventually one did. A small shop in Vermont, run by a man who had been collecting rare editions for 40 years. He had 1 copy left. First edition, hardcover, dust jacket still intact. It was arrived. He sat at his kitchen table and arrived. He sat at his kitchen table and opened the package slowly. The book was beautiful. Not flashy or ornate, but solid. It felt like something that had survived a long time and still had weight to it. He opened the front cover and slipped a letter inside. 4 pages, handwritten, front and back. He had spent 5 nights writing it, sitting up late after she had gone home, choosing every word carefully, crossing things out and starting over, trying to say everything he had never been able to say out loud. He wrote about the first day in the coffee shop, about the way she smiled at him before he even knew her name. The version of the future that didn't include version of the future that didn't include her felt incomplete. He sealed the letter inside the book and wrapped it in brown paper and placed it in a bag beside the suit he had bought for the occasion. He even called her best friend, Nadia, told her the plan, asked her to make sure Leah didn't schedule anything that evening. Nadia laughed and said, "She's going to lose it." He smiled when she said that. It was the last time he smiled about any of it. February 14th arrived. He woke up early, which was unusual for him. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the apartment was gray and still. He lay in bed for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, running through the plan in his head. Aloud if the moment felt right. He had loud if the moment felt right. He had rehearsed that part in his head more than he would ever admit. At 8 in the morning, he sent her a text. Nothing elaborate, just a simple, "Happy Valentine's Day," followed by a heart. He watched the screen for a moment, waiting for the notification to change from delivered to read. It didn't. He set the phone down and told himself she was probably still asleep. By 10, she still hadn't replied. He picked up the phone, checked it, set it down again, picked it up once more. No new messages. He opened their conversation thread and scrolled up through the last few weeks. That was when something cold flickered in his stomach, though he pushed it away before it could take shape. The messages between them had grown thinner, shorter. Her replies had become one-word answers where there used to be paragraphs. He hadn't noticed before, or maybe he had and simply refused to look at it clearly. He closed the thread and put the phone face down on the counter. At noon, he called her. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Her voice on the recording sounded warm, playful, like a version of her he hadn't heard in weeks. He hung up without leaving a message. He told himself she was busy. Maybe she was with Nadia, maybe she was getting ready, maybe she had a surprise of her own planned. He told himself all of these things because telling himself the truth was not something he was ready to do. By 2 o'clock, a tension had settled into his chest that he couldn't shake. He tried to distract himself. He ironed his shirt again, even though it didn't need it. He checked the reservation confirmation email for the 3rd time. He reread the letter he had written, then folded it back into the book and sealed the wrapping again. Every small task was an attempt to hold the day together, to keep it on the track he had set it on weeks ago. But the silence from her phone was getting louder, and no amount of preparation could drown it out. At 3 o'clock, he sat down on the edge of his bed and placed both hands on his knees. His phone rested on the nightstand beside him. He stared at it the way a man stares at a door he knows someone is about to walk out of. That feeling had arrived fully now. The one that sits heavy behind your ribs and makes your mouth go dry. The one your body recognizes long before your mind is willing to catch up. He knew something was wrong. He had known it all day. Maybe he had known it for months. But knowing and accepting are 2 very different things, and he was still standing firmly on the side of knowing, refusing to cross over. At 4:15, he got dressed. He put on the suit, adjusted the tie, picked up the bag with the gift inside, walked to his car, sat down behind the wheel, and waited. At 5 o'clock, his phone rang. Her name appeared on the screen, and for one brief, foolish second, relief washed over him. She was calling. She was there. Everything was fine. He answered before the second ring. "Hey," he said. His voice came out lighter than he expected, almost cheerful. She tells you everything before a single word tells you everything before a single word is spoken. He heard her breathe in, slow and shaky, and in that half second between her inhale and the first word she spoke, he felt the ground beneath him start to tilt. "I can't do this anymore." She said it quietly, not with anger, not with tears. Her voice was flat and steady, like she had practiced this sentence so many times it had lost all of its edges. She told him she'd been feeling it for months. She told him she didn't know how to bring it up, that she kept waiting for the right time, but there was never a right time, and she couldn't pretend through another night, especially not tonight. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't want to hurt him. She said she still cared about him, but that caring about someone and wanting to be with them are not always the same thing. He didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just sat there in his pressed suit, in his quiet car with a gift on the passenger seat and a letter she would never hear, and he listened to the woman he had spent 3 years loving explain, in calm and measured words, why she no longer wanted to be loved by him. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. When it ended, he placed the phone on his lap and stared straight ahead through the windshield. The parking garage was empty. The concrete walls were gray and cold and close. Somewhere above him, a fluorescent light buzzed and flickered, and the sound of it filled the car in a way that made the silence feel even heavier. No, he didn't cry. He didn't hit the steering wheel. He didn't call her back. He just sat there, completely still, while something inside him folded in on itself so quietly that no one in the world would have known it was happening. The reservation went unused. The rooftop table sat empty that night, candles unlit, 2 chairs facing a skyline that no one came to see. The book with the letter inside stayed in the bag on the passenger seat. He drove home sometime after dark, though he couldn't remember starting the engine. He walked into his apartment, set the bag on the kitchen counter, and stood in the middle of the room without turning on a single light. He had spent 6 weeks building a night that was supposed to bring her closer. It took her less than 4 minutes to make sure it never existed. And now, was left with a question that would follow him for the rest of his life, was left with a question that would follow him for weeks. If she had already left months ago, then who exactly had he been loving all this time? If you watched this video to this point and you found this video entertaining and valuable, please comment any word below to let me know you watched to the end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. We post videos every day, and your support helps us continue to create good content. Share these stories with loved ones and friends. Let's continue. The first morning after was the quietest morning of his life. He woke up not to an alarm, but to the absence of one. His eyes opened slowly, and for a brief, merciful second, he forgot. His hand reached across the bed toward the side she used to sleep on when she stayed over, and his fingers pressed into cold, flat sheets that hadn't been disturbed. That was when it returned. Not gradually, not gently. It came back all at once like a wave he had been standing too close to, and it pulled him under before he had a chance to brace himself. He lay there for a long time. He didn't check his phone. He already knew there would be nothing to see. No good morning text, no photo of her coffee with a sleepy emoji beneath it. No voice note rambling about something funny that happened on her way to class. The screen would be empty, and he was not yet strong enough to look at proof of that emptiness. So he lay still, staring at the ceiling, and let the silence press down on him like a hand on his chest. He got up eventually. Not because he wanted to, but because the body has a way of moving even when the mind has stopped. He walked to the bathroom, brushed his teeth, looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes were swollen, not from crying, because he still hadn't cried, but from the kind of exhaustion that starts behind the eyes and sinks into the bones. He gripped the edge of the sink and made a deal with himself right there. He would not fall apart. He would bury this. He would be fine. He was not fine. The first week was a blur of mechanical routines and hollow motions. He went to work. He answered emails. He sat through meetings and nodded at things he didn't hear. His coworkers didn't notice because he had always been the quiet one, the steady one, the one who never seemed rattled by anything. But beneath that stillness, something was unraveling thread by thread, and he could feel it happening in real time without knowing how to stop it. It was the small things that gutted him the most, not the big dramatic reminders, not the empty chair at dinner or the missing name on his phone screen. It was the small, invisible things that no one else could see. He reached for her coffee creamer at the grocery store on autopilot, and had to set it back on the shelf with a hand that trembled just enough to embarrass him. He found one of her hair ties behind the bathroom sink, a thin black elastic twisted into a figure 8, and he held it in his palm for 10 minutes before placing it in a drawer he would not open again for weeks. He drove past the coffee shop where they met and had to take a different route home because the sight of it made his throat tighten so fast he thought he was going to choke. But the worst part, the part he could not outrun no matter how hard he tried, was the realization that slowly formed over those first 2 weeks like a photograph developing in reverse. He had not lost her on Valentine's Day. He had lost her long before that. Valentine's Day was just the moment she finally said it out loud. The truth had been there for months, living inside the silences he chose to ignore, the canceled plans he made excuses for, the texts that grew shorter and colder while he convinced himself she was just busy, just tired, just going through something she would eventually come back from. She wasn't coming back. She had been leaving in inches, and he had watched every single inch happen and called it something else. He called it stress. He called it distance. He called it a rough patch. He dressed up her absence in language that made it survivable because the alternative, admitting that the woman he loved was no longer choosing him, was a truth too heavy to carry while still trying to stand. And now, he had to carry it anyway. He replayed their last few months together over and over, and each time he did, he saw something new. Something he had missed the first time because he wasn't looking, or because he was looking so hard at what he wanted to see that the real picture became invisible. He remembered a night in December when they were sitting on his couch watching a movie, and she had been on her phone the entire time, not texting anyone in particular, just scrolling. But her body was angled away from him, and when he put his arm around her, she didn't lean in the way she used to. She stayed stiff, polite, present in body and completely gone in every other way. He noticed it that night. He felt the gap between them widen by a fraction he couldn't measure. And then he pulled her closer, kissed the side of her head, and told himself it was nothing. It was not nothing. He remembered a conversation in January where he brought up a trip they had talked about taking in the spring. He was excited. He had been researching places, sending her links, building an itinerary in his head. But when he mentioned it that night, not a yes, it was not even a maybe, 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 it It was not even a maybe. 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 It was not even not a yes. It was not even a maybe. It was the sound of someone who no longer saw herself in his future and didn't have the courage to tell him yet. He should have asked. He should have stopped planning and started paying attention. He should have sat across from her one evening and said, "Where are you? Because I can feel you leaving, and I need to know if I'm imagining it." But he didn't ask because he was terrified of the answer. So instead, he planned harder. He loved harder. He made reservations and wrote letters and hunted down rare books because doing something felt safer than knowing something. And in the end, all that effort didn't pull her closer. It just disguised how far apart they had already drifted. That was the consequence he could not escape. Not just that she left. People leave, hearts break. That is not new. What destroyed him was the understanding that he had abandoned himself in the process of loving her. He had given so much of who he was to the relationship that when the relationship ended, there was nothing left standing on his side of it. His Monday nights were hers. His Saturday mornings were hers. His future, his identity, his sense of purpose had all been filtered through her, and without her, he didn't know what shape his life was supposed to take. He sat with that emptiness for a long time, not days, weeks. He sat with it in the mornings when the apartment was too quiet. He sat with it at night when sleep came late and left early. He sat with it during conversations with friends who told him he would be okay, that time heals, that he just needed to get back out there. He nodded when they said these things. He smiled. He agreed. And then he went home and sat in the dark with a truth none of them could touch. He had not just lost Leah. He had lost the man he was before her, the man who had his own routines, his own interests, his own reasons to wake up in the morning that had nothing to do with another person. That man had been buried slowly, willingly, joyfully even, beneath 3 years of loving someone so completely that there was no room left for himself. And now, standing in the rubble of a relationship he once believed was permanent, he had to figure out who he was without her. That was the hardest part. Not the heartbreak, not the silence, not the empty passenger seat or the unused reservation or the sealed letter inside a book that would never be opened. The hardest part was standing in front of the mirror, looking at a man he didn't recognize, and accepting that he had done this to himself. Not out of weakness, not out of stupidity, but out of love. And that made it worse. Because he couldn't even be angry at the reason. He couldn't hate the thing that brought him here. He could only look at it clearly for the first time and understand that love without self-preservation is not love at all. It is erasure. And he had erased himself so thoroughly that the only thing left was the outline of a man shaped entirely around a woman who was no longer there. Recovery did not arrive the way he expected it to. There was no single moment of clarity, no dramatic turning point where the pain lifted and he suddenly felt whole again. It came slowly, almost reluctantly, in fragments so small he barely noticed them at first. A Tuesday morning where he woke up and didn't immediately reach for his phone. A Thursday evening where he cooked dinner for himself, just for himself, and actually tasted the food. A Sunday afternoon where he walked through the park they used to visit together and made it all the way to the end of the trail without his chest tightening. These were not victories. Not yet. But they were proof that the man who had been buried beneath 3 years of loving someone else was still in there, somewhere, clawing his way back to the surface one quiet day at a time. And he started doing things he had forgotten he enjoyed, not because a therapist told him to or because he read it in some article about moving on, but because the emptiness demanded to be filled with something, and for the first time in years, he chose to fill it with himself. He picked up a book that had been sitting on his nightstand untouched for months, one he had bought for himself long before Leah, and he read it cover to cover in 4 days. Or he went for runs in the early morning when the city was still half asleep and the air was cold enough to sting his lungs. He sat in coffee shops alone and didn't look at the door every time it opened. He relearned how to exist in a room without scanning it for her. It was uncomfortable at first. Sitting with himself, truly sitting with himself, felt foreign. For 3 years, being no one to orbit around, he was forced to know one to orbit around. He was forced to turn that attention inward. What he found there was not pretty. He found loneliness he had been carrying long before Leah ever sat down across from him in that cafe. He found a man who had been so desperate to be loved that he was willing to disappear inside of it. He found patterns that didn't start with her and wouldn't end with her unless he had the courage to look at them honestly. So he did. Not all at once. But slowly, with the same patience he once gave to her, he began giving to himself. He called an old friend he hadn't spoken to in over a year. Not because they had a falling out, but because he had let the friendship fade the way people do when they pour everything into one person and forget that their world is supposed to be wider than that. The friend picked up on the second ring and said, "I was wondering when you'd call." They talked for 2 hours. He didn't mention Leah. He didn't need to. The conversation alone was enough to remind him that he had a life outside of her, and that life had been waiting patiently for him to come back to it. He went back to the gym, not to transform his body or to distract himself from the pain, but because he remembered that he used to enjoy it. He used to go 4 times a week before Leah. Then it became 3, then 2, then none. Because the time he used to spend there got absorbed into dinners with her, weekends with her, long phone calls with her that stretched into the hours he once reserved for himself. He had handed over those hours willingly, even gratefully, because being with her felt more important than being with himself. And now, standing in front of a squat rack for the first time in over a year, he understood the cost of that trade. If you are still watching this video and find this video entertaining and valuable, please comment any word below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. We post videos every day, and your support helps us continue to create good content. Share these stories with loved ones and friends. Let's continue. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. The ache didn't vanish, but it became quieter. It moved from the center of his chest to somewhere further back, still present, still real, but no longer the first thing he felt when he opened his eyes. He stopped replaying the phone call. He stopped rereading their old messages. He stopped driving past her street on his way home, a habit he had developed without meaning to, and quit the moment he caught himself doing it. One evening, he sat down at his kitchen table and looked at the bag that had been resting on the counter since Valentine's Day. The book was still inside. The letter was still sealed. He pulled it out slowly and held it in both hands, running his thumb along the edge of the brown paper wrapping. He sat with it for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to his bookshelf, and placed it on the top shelf, spine facing outward, beside his own collection. And he didn't throw it away, he didn't hide it. He let it exist as what it was, a record of how deeply he was capable of loving someone, proof that his heart had that kind of reach, even if the person it reached for had already turned away. He would not be ashamed of that. But he would never do it the same way again. Because the lesson, the one that had taken a breakup and a sealed letter and a 6-week plan and an empty rooftop table and a 4-minute phone call and weeks of silence and grief and self-confrontation to teach him, was painfully simple. You cannot love someone at the expense of yourself and expect to survive the loss. You cannot pour everything you are into another person and call it devotion when it is really disappearance. Love is not supposed to hollow you out. It is not supposed to leave you standing in a dark apartment, unable to name a single thing about yourself that exists independently of the person who left. He knew that now, not because someone told him, but because he lived it. And on a quiet morning sometime in April, 2 months after the worst Valentine's Day of his life, he woke up early, made his own coffee, sat by the window in his apartment, and watched the sun come up over a city that was still moving, still breathing, still making room for him in it. His phone was on the table beside him, no messages, no missed calls. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, that silence didn't hurt. It felt like space. And space, he was learning, is where a man rebuilds. He wasn't going to talk about any of this. He had made that deal with himself the morning after. Gripping the bathroom sink with swollen eyes and a clenched jaw. He told himself he would bury it, move on, heal quietly. But silence was never the answer. It never is. And if his story found its way to someone sitting in their own car, in their own parking garage, dressed for a night that would never happen, holding a gift that would never be opened, he wanted them to hear one thing clearly. You are allowed to love deeply, but never so deeply that you forget you exist without them. Because when they leave, and they might, the only person left to save you is the one you abandoned first, yourself. If you watched this video to the end and you found this video entertaining and valuable, please comment any word below to let me know you watched to the end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new videos. We post videos every day, and your support helps us continue to create good content. Share these stories with loved ones and friends.